a motion which concentrates on a critical sector of our society, and unfortunately one in which the government is failing to give the priority in which it deserves. This is only the second time in the lifetime of this government that we've had a substantial debate on this issue, and both times the debate has been facilitated by my party. We now have a situation where early childhood care and education is the highest cost in Ireland and anywhere in the OECD. We have a workforce that's undervalued and demoralised. Early childhood education is a fundamental component of Ireland's education system, and the unique learning experiences that takes place in early childhood provides an essential cornerstone for lifelong learning and educational attainment. Effective early childhood care and education has a significant role to play in improving outcomes for children, particularly for children who are faced with barriers to learning, thereby reducing or eliminating the need for later interventions. A balanced, effective early childhood care and education system is about delivering horizontal policy coordination to create an early childhood system that serves children, families, the workforce and society as a whole. Last year, in reply to our motion, the then Minister spoke of how we were data-rich in terms of Irish children, and how the empirical evidence showed the benefits of early intervention in terms of school readiness, cognitive and behaviour developments. She quoted from the medium-term economic strategy statement, which said, "Our increasing child and youth population is a significant resource for our country, and therefore ensuring the best possible outcomes for this group is an important element in our future economic planning." Yet still, this government has failed to live up to this statement. The early years strategy, an overarching plan, essentially a roadmap of how this government wants to see this critical sector develop over the next number of years, has yet to be published. And in the absence of this roadmap, in the absence of this plan, we have a very disjointed, uncoordinated approach, an ad hoc approach, so to speak. If you look at the area of affordability and look at what the Department of Social Protection done, they cut the child benefit rate, they reduced and taxed the maternity benefit, they changed the eligibility criteria for one-parent families. If you look at what was done in the Department of Children, they reneged on their promise to introduce a free preschool year in the lifetime of the government. I think that's something, Minister, you'll acknowledge that is not going to happen. The promised review on the Community Childcare Subvention Scheme and the Community Education and Training Scheme, that has yet to be published. We don't even know, has it started, is it completed, or where is it at? You have cut the capitation rates for the free preschool year, and you have increased the adult-child ratio there as well. The necessary reforms of this critical sector, while they have been announced, they have yet to be implemented or costed in terms of the financial impact these reforms will have on the sector, which is already under-resourced and undervalued. The sector, the workforce of this sector, 24,000 strong people. These are the people, the parents of our children in trust on a daily basis for the education and care of children. And this government does not recognise the pivotal role they play in delivering of quality early education and care. If we talk about affordability, and Minister, in your own counter motion, you speak about the money that's there in terms of the provision of the community subvention scheme and the SET scheme, 70 million per annum and 175 million for the free preschool year. I don't argue, I don't dispute those figures. But the community childcare subvention scheme, this is a scheme that was brought about to help those who are the most marginalised, those who are the most vulnerable, people whose only source of income is social welfare. The review of that scheme was promised in excess of 18 months ago. We have yet to see where that is. And we know that there's a segregation of children who are less well off in society, because the only people who can avail of this scheme are people who attend community facilities. And there's nothing wrong with community facilities, only that we don't have enough. We need to see that scheme extended to all facilities, because of the 4,300 services that are out there, only 1/3 of them are community. You talk about the 175 million that is there for the free preschool year and the 2,500 in savings that is for childcare costs for working families. That is not enough, Minister. Were you listening to the Claire Byrne show last night, where a firefighter was talking about the exorbitant costs that he and his partner have to pay to have their 3 children minded? We all remember the harrowing story of Donna Hartnett in the Irish Examiner earlier this year, who said, are her children going to have to look over her grave and say, she was a great woman, she paid all her taxes? I was contacted by a constituent, and it's not just full daycare service providers or full daycare services. The costs are exorbitant in all sections. I was contacted by a constituent who is facing 11% increase in the after-school costs. She said, our creche provides an excellent service. It employs 16 staff. As a family, we couldn't function without it, but we're fortunate it's not closing. Now, Minister, report after report will confirm that to have 2 children minded full-time is costing $16,500 a year. That is a second mortgage. For sole parents, parents that you chose to target with your change in criteria for the one-parent family allowance, 45% of sole parents' average wages goes on childcare costs. We need to see critical action on this now, Minister. You're 4 years in power and we have not seen any action. You talk about a graduate-led professional workforce, and that is a great aspiration, and that is something we would all sign up to. But yet still, the Learner Fund, which you introduced, is restricted to only level 5 or level 6 for people who are team leaders in the ECCE schemes. How can, Minister, tell me, how can people who are earning just above the minimum wage, who have no professional development days, how can they afford to enhance their qualifications if they are not supported by the state? How can we aspire to have that graduate-led professional workforce if we are not matching it with the necessary resources? The existing free preschool year, that's contracted to provide 15 hours per week, 38 weeks in the year. That does not take into consideration the non-contact time, the administrative responsibilities. And yet still, this government reduced the capitation levels payable for this scheme. It's having an unbearable effect on the sustainability of these services. And at a very minimum, Minister, I made the point last week in the committee, this government should look at restoring the capitation levels to 2011. It would make a huge difference to the sustainability of this sector. There's no nationally agreed or standardised pay scale. And there is an opportunity now that the Low Pay Commission is being formed. Can you give a commitment, Minister, in your contribution later on tonight or tomorrow night, that this government will ensure that this sector of 24,000 people will be included in the Low Pay Commission and will ensure that it is linked to state-funded childcare schemes? And finally, Cathaoirleach, the issue of opportunity for all, regardless of background or regardless of ability. There is no inclusion plan or additional funding supports for children in mainstream early childhood services for people with a disability. This flies in the face of equal opportunities for all. especially when you consider that the universal free preschool year is for all.
Thank you, Deputy.
Minister, I have raised this issue continuously for the last number of years, and every time I raise the issue, whether it is with yourself or whether it's been with your predecessors, that it's bounced, the responsibility is bounced from education to health to children. No one will take up the responsibility for the provision of special needs education. And while no one at government level accepts this responsibility, it's the children who are suffering. So, Minister, what I want to see in relation to special education, I want to see a national policy. A national policy so that it doesn't matter whether you're in Cork, Kerry, Westmeath, Longford, wherever, there is a clear policy there for delivery with children with special education needs.
Thank you, Deputy.
And we can start off by looking at introducing a second free preschool year for children with special education and needs, and look at rolling out the full ESPN Act to ensure that those children do get the start in life that they deserve, the same as everybody else.
Thank you, Deputy.
Deputy Troy, 10 minutes, Deputy.
Thank you, Concordia. Can I thank all the members from across the House for contributing to this debate. I think it's a most critical and important issue. And I apologise that I missed some of the debate last night, but I had an opportunity to look over the contributions of the members that I missed on the Blacks today. And I'm glad that Fianna Fáil used its private members' time to ensure for only the second time in the lifetime of this government that we've had a substantial debate on this issue. And I am conscious that the private member business calls for a lot. And I wouldn't expect, nor would it be possible for whoever is in government to implement all policies at once. The 0.7% of GDP includes the cost of the second free preschool year, includes the cost of extending the community childcare supplement. So I'm not asking for that in addition. That's included. That being said, it is a lot of money. But what this private member's business does, it outlines our aspirations for this sector, which could be dealt with in an incremental way. And it is disappointing to listen to some government TDs, not all, some of them were very positive, but some government TDs condemn us for seeking additional investment in this area and for seeking to prioritise this area. Because in the absence of the publication of the early years strategy, something this government promised in 2012, we do not know, or we do not know what way the government wishes to see this crucial area develop over the next number of years. I have to say I was amazed that last night, after 4 years in office, the Minister said it is crucial that we develop a coherent whole-of-government approach to investment in childcare services. I would have thought that one of the advantages of having a senior minister at cabinet table would be to ensure that there always has been a whole-of-government approach. And we know that this government approach is not working, because the CSO figures published a number of weeks ago said that the children who are living in consistent poverty has gone from 10% in 2012 to 12% in 2014. That's children who are going to bed cold and children who are going to bed hungry. We also know that the number of people living in deprivation has increased from 13.7% in 2008 to 30.5% in 2014. That is clear evidence that this government policies is not working and that we don't have a joined-up government approach. Because last year in this debate we spoke about where Minister Fitzgerald in 1 week launched a report recommending extending the maternity benefit to 1 year. The following week the Cabinet chose to tax maternity benefit. Where's the joined-up thinking there? And to me personally, where better for a child to spend the first year of their life than at home? And I think we should look at introducing maternity benefit on an incremental basis up to 12 months. We also witnessed another lack of a coordinated approach when we saw this government launch a vicious attack on lone parents. Minister Burton, when announcing the changes, she said that they would not proceed without a full Scandinavian model that was bankable. What did we get? We got an after-school scheme. And I'm surprised that the Minister had the audacity to mention it in his speech last night, because that scheme, when it was announced, was talked about creating 6,000 places. But after 18 months in operation, less than 5% take-up. It has been an abysmal scheme and it has not worked. But the changes to lone parents has gone ahead. And the people who have seen the greatest hit and who have been hit the hardest are the people who choose to work. The lone parents who can't get work, who remain with their only source of income being social welfare, that stays the same. The people who have the incentive, who have the drive to get up and go to work, they're the people who are hardest hit. And I don't think that's very fair. The Minister talked last night, he said, it's a well-known fact that childcare cost is like a second mortgage. That's why this government is taking it so seriously. That's why in his counter-motion he did not produce one proposal in how he is going to address the affordability of childcare. What he said was, after 4 years of being in government, that the government decided to establish an interdepartmental group to look at affordability. A group that will not report back for a minimum of 6 months, 4 or 5 months before a general election. And what is this government going to say? We have done nothing for you for the past 5 years, but re-elect us and we'll look at doing something for you in the next 5 years. I don't think anybody is going to believe Minister Riley's promise in that regard. And once again last night, the Minister seemed to dismiss the notion of tax credits for families, again without saying what his preferred option is. And we have to remember, only 4 weeks ago, the Irish Independent had a front-page spread of how this government was introducing tax credits. And they didn't pick that off the ground. That information was leaked to them, in my opinion, by the department. But where is it now? Or what is the government going to do for the middle-income earners, the people who get up at 6:30 every morning and before it, who leave their children in full daycare settings from 6:30 in the morning maybe till 6:30 in the evening, and who come home at the end of the week jaded, no better off financially? What is this government going to do for those people? And if we look at the other cohort of people, the most marginalised in society, the scheme that's there to help them is only there in a very restricted way, the community childcare supplement. That is only available in a third of our service providers, What about children who come from the less well-off families in society where there's no community setting? We have no proposals there in terms of how we're going to deal with that. And if we look at some of the government policies that have been implemented over the last number of years, they have contributed to the cost of running childcare service providers. A memo went out from a service provider in Longford County, advertising the increase in fees. Why? 1, commercial rates. Up to 2011, we were not charged rates. We now have a substantial annual rates bill. Water rates. Commercial water rates was introduced last year. ECCE, free preschool year. The implementation of the preschool year capitation was reduced in the last 2 years. Employers' PRSI. The increased employers' PRSI has created a substantial bill for us in 2014. That's what the government has done. Every one of those price increases has been a direct consequence of government policies. Now, we didn't hear last night anything about the 8-point plan. It wasn't alluded to whatsoever in the Minister's speech. And I'm not surprised, because there's not one point on that 8-point plan of quality agenda that has been implemented in full, despite it being 2 years since it's announced. We're still awaiting publication of the new regulations, and despite the necessary legislation being enacted in January 2014 with cross-party support, the new registration process is still not in place. The workforce, the 24,000 strong workforce, which are providing an invaluable service. There are people who we entrust the care and education of our children. And last night the Minister wished to acknowledge the considerable contribution of child providers and staff to the provision of quality services. I'm sure they'll welcome that acknowledgement. But later on in the debate, he abdicated his responsibility and he said the pay and conditions of employment are matters for the management of services. He forgets that the main contract for these services are with the state. We talk about a quality service. If we want a quality service, we have to ensure that the funding levels recognise that. And part of a quality service is ensuring that we have a quality staff. And I think at a very minimum, this government must confirm that these people will be included in the low pay commission. Because if we want a graduate-led workforce, we have to ensure that they're paid. Finally, Cancórla, I want to finish off by mentioning the area of special needs education. I have to say, I thought it was an awful statement for a former Minister of Health last night to say, I know the Health Service Executive, where possible, provides additional supports to children with special needs to enable them to avail of preschool services. Where possible. Where about equal opportunities for all? There is a clear disadvantage being forced upon children with special educational needs, and there has been no acknowledgement of this by government. It's bounced around from health to children to education, and no one department is taking up responsibility for special educational needs. That needs to change, and that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
We have the empirical evidence which confirms that investment in the early years ensures the best return not only for our children but for their families and for society in general, and I commend this motion to the House.